Hello again. Well, on this beautiful Wednesday sunny day in Brighton, I'm with Gary Pargeter, who runs Lunch Positive. Hello, Gary.
Hello.
Gary, can you tell me a little bit about Lunch Positive, where it comes from and what you do here?
So Lunch Positive is a weekly lunch club for people with HIV, and we formed in 2009. And it came about following the closure of another local HIV project called Open Door. That had been around for about 20-25 years. And that came to being, at a time when things were very, very bad, very difficult for people with HIV. Prognosis was poor. Treatments weren't as effective as they are now. And sadly that closed in 2008. So we started Lunch Positive as a consequence of that.
And it provides a lunch, a safe space, a social situation, that kind of thing for people?
Yes, so Lunch Positives every Friday, and what we do is we provide a healthy lunch for people to come along and share, a coffee lounge area, and it's all about providing a safe space that's supportive, that creates the right environment for a community, and for people to socialise where they wouldn't normally, to get to know one another, and importantly to be together where stigma or the fear of stigma isn't an issue for people.
Okay, well, I will add to that myself that you also provide a very welcoming atmosphere. I had, as you know, occasion to visit you the other week, and I was extremely impressed with how comforting and safe and welcoming the whole environment was. I think it's a really, it's a good thing that you're doing here, and as a person who has a bit of a history of self-stigmatising, I think you made me in particular feel very comfortable. And I thank you for that. And I would like to ask you, as your experience with working quite a lot with people with issues similar to mine, do you frequently or occasionally, or do you come across HIV stigma or people that talk about situations and things that have happened to them that one would describe as HIV stigma?
I think stigma has various impacts on people, and fundamentally that's the reason why many people come along to Lunch Positive and use other similar services. People have experienced it in relationships with others, in the communities that they live and work in, and just in everyday life. So it does play a very big part in the reasons why people often make use of services, become involved in volunteering, and seek out a more supportive community. And
do you think that the work that you do can help us with the intention to reduce HIV stigma?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that we often hear from people when they come along to the lunch club is that they feel liberated or they feel empowered, or a similar such kind of language, really. So the more that people can encounter relationships and a community where people don't feel different, they don't feel stigmatised by their HIV, it feels more normal and part of everyday life. The more empowered they become, and they go on to empower themselves and others, hopefully.
I think you're absolutely right there. So if you're comfortable with it, would you be able to give us some examples of the kind of stigma that people that come to Lunch Positive talk about with you?
Yeah, of course. So very frequently we hear of people who've disclosed their HIV status to friends or people they're in relationships with. And for some people that's a really successful thing, but for many others that can be really difficult. We've met people who've been rejected in friendships and in relationships. And they felt that they've done something wrong, which of course they haven't. It's actually the others that don't understand and don't empathise and don't know all the facts. But once that's happened to people, it's sometimes very, very difficult to regain self-confidence and self-esteem, and it kind of perpetuates itself.
Well, so they've been stigmatised, they take that on board, and then they start stigmatising themselves, and it becomes a vicious circle.
Absolutely. And very recently, for example, we met somebody who came along, and and they'd had some of these very bad experiences, and some of the language they were using about their own HIV diagnosis and status, wasn't actually that helpful, and it signified how they felt about themselves. They were using the term I'm not clean anymore.
Good. Sorry, I'm stuttering because that shocks me, because I know very well that it's become something of a terminology on sites like Grindr for people to say, "Are you clean?" and they are implying, "Are you HIV negative?" They don't mean anything else. They mean, "Are you HIV negative?" So people are taking that on board and turning it in on themselves.
Absolutely, and people are seeing it as an indicator, of good or bad, which of course is neither, and that then affects how they go on to live their everyday lives, often to their detriment, very sadly.
That's really quite shocking, and that's just a simple thing like language, just words which people are using. I can't speak for them, but I can't imagine that people are thinking what they're saying. They really need to learn about what they're actually saying to people and think about the impact and basically change the words, change the language. But when I was talking to you earlier, you were telling me about some really dark things that happen to people that perhaps are not living in a situation that most of us would take as a normal, happy family home kind of situation. And these people face even more difficulties.
Absolutely. We regularly encounter people who are homeless or street sleeping, or who might be accessing hostels. And very often, people are fearful of disclosing their status, and we know some people who the reaction from others has been so marked, that they've been fearful, and they've been blackmailed and coerced into doing things that they would prefer not to do. And they hide their medications so that other people might not discover their HIV status, and it basically inhibits them in fulfilling what is already actually quite a difficult and sometimes vulnerable life.
That's outrageous. That really is. I can't respond to that because I can't think quickly enough. But if somebody is living in a hostel or moving around from hostel to hostel, having to maintain taking their medication, having to hide it from people for fear of blackmail, coercion, I presume bullying,
Absolutely.
Then there's something seriously wrong here. There is no way that any decent society would allow somebody with a serious condition, it's a serious condition, it needs to be maintained by daily medication. If it's maintained by daily medication, it becomes not serious. It becomes just a virus, nothing more. So to allow people to be living their lives in a way like this just seems wrong. It really seems very, very wrong to me. And I don't know what we can do to resolve that, but I do know we can do some work to change the language, change the soundtrack, change what people think, give them the truth, give them the information that you equals you. I'm not going to say what that means again, because by now everybody should know what it means. We should say that people need to learn this, they need to think about what they're doing, think of what they're doing and saying to other people, and change your bloody behaviour, basically. I don't know, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, and I think for us all to remember, that stigma hasn't gone away. And whilst we might be talking to like-minded friends and colleagues and so forth, to always understand that whilst we might not stigmatise others, and we might understand HIV stigma well, that sometimes others don't, and always be ready to challenge, always be ready to educate, and always be ready to call people on stigma where they encounter it.
Absolutely. I personally couldn't agree with you more. And I would also add that from my own experience, that immersing myself in this particular stigma project has taught me a lot, a huge amount, but it's also empowered me, because as I understand stigma and I understand how my own stigmatisation of myself feels and how I perceive stigma that may come my way or more, may not, plus the stigma I have actually encountered, do you know what? Stop it. Enough is enough. Anyway, I'm going to call this to an end now. It's been fascinating talking to you, Gary. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.